We met in January this year in Davos. Someone said to me, oh yes, someone who wants to meet you. She's a supermodel and an actress, and she wants to talk about her website. And I was like, oh my God, really? I mean, really? All right. And so we sat down and had a conversation, and it was really amazing because she started talking about open source software and gift economies and really cool stuff that I thought was very, very interesting. So here we are.
Interestingly, I'd met Jimmy, I was at an event there, and he showed interest, and he said, well, come and let's have a coffee and talk about it for half an hour. And I thought it was going to be my only 20-minute, half-an-hour window with him ever, and kind of like threw a billion questions at 100 miles per hour, trying to get them all out. I didn't know that like 5-6 months later, he'd be quite heavily involved in the project.
Yeah, heavily involved, let me tell you, as an angel investor in impossible.com. Let's, before we carry on this discussion, just give you, the audience, a chance to see exactly what impossible.com is all about. Let's roll this. Backwards. That's it in a nutshell, but let's just talk a little more about that. What was the genesis of this idea?
So it was actually on a plane going to the Thai-Burmese border randomly, and there's a Goethe quote that ideas get caught, and I feel like I just kind of caught an idea, and I don't know exactly where from, and I was like, wow, why does that not exist? And then that was a year and a half ago, and over the last, I mean, it comes from my kind of probably more political, philosophical, and sociological interests. But over the last year and a half, I've been doing a lot of research in this space and in the economics of the space, but also people who've tried to do similar things. And haven't found an example that I think has really captured the imagination that I think could be captured, because there's so much research to show that if you hit it right, it kind of taps into innate human behavior psychologically and sociologically that works, gifting economies. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying.
I think you're being quite humble. I mean, I know that you've done hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of work, research work into sort of the sort of socio-economic dimensions of what is this sort of new technology and how it can sort of expand the way that we work and the values that we hold.
Interesting, Jimmy, I'll say on that point, sorry, it's not new technology though. I mean, it's my interest in how you can use new technology to do things that are now in kind of modern society incredibly complex and can make transparent, for example, connections that you might not really see are viable. But actually it's deep-rooted in kind of really old human patterns of behavior that actually anthropology teaches you more about than kind of new technology.
No, make a very good point. Jimmy, when you Google gift economy, Wikipedia comes up. There is, and Lily and I were talking about this earlier on, there is no bigger global example of the philosophical dimensions of social media. And as you say, I mean, these are age-old sort of values, but social media has really played a part in expanding our sort of universe, as it were, and how we may all get involved. Can the gifting economy, do you think, work on both an intellectual level, and that perhaps being Wikipedia, and on a socio-economic level, that being, for example, impossible.com?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about Wikipedia is just the sheer number of hours that people donate freely of their time to do something that they find interesting for themselves, they find it useful to do, as a huge just gift to the world. And I think that this kind of impulse is one that we too often overlook, that people want to do something useful, they want to help others. The way I look at it is you can think about things in a really stark two-valued model of something you do for profit or for money, and something you do as charity, sort of do-gooder. And I think if that's all you think about, you miss a huge swath of how people actually behave, which is not necessarily charity in the sense of duty or, oh, I should do this, is the right thing to do, but it's just fun. It's community-oriented. You want to go and help people. You know, when you go and you take your grandmother to the grocery store, is that charity? No. Is it something you do for money? No. Is it something you do because it's a great thing to do and it makes you happy? Yes. And one of the things that when we first talked, Lily talked about is how in modern society, so people are quite disconnected from each other. You don't know your neighbors. People want to, but they just don't know how. And so part of this concept is it's a way for people to actually meet people who are feeling good and benevolent and want to do other things with cool people. So.
When you reflect on how you set up and what you went through and what your initial vision was, what, a decade or so ago now, and then you think about what Lily is doing now, what are the parallels?
Oh, there's a lot of parallels, actually. One, I had absolutely no concept or thought about a business model, really. Lily also has no concept or thought about a business. I'm exaggerating in both cases slightly. You know, I had some ideas, didn't really know. I wasn't thinking of it as either a business or charity necessarily. It was it was something that needed to be built, and I knew that I would figure out some way to make it sustainable if I can make it successful, and we've done that. So that's one similarity. Another similarity is, you know, this idea that it's about tapping into not charitable impulse and not a for-profit impulse, but just fun. And, you know, nothing like this works unless it's fun.
I'd say 2 points on that as well. I've had a lot of brilliant people advising me, and from the economics perspective. And interestingly, for example, in the UK, apparently the economy of regard, which is what people do for one another for free, also called by somebody else the gift paradigm, is worth more if you were to monetize it than the GDP. And so it's actually very kind of active, but it's just not necessarily acknowledged. And it'd be interesting to see how that could also be catalyzed if you did make these possibilities more transparent, where people could do things for each other. And then the other point I was going to say in that point of the kind of connectivity, I've been fascinated with the phenomenon in a way that is social media. Partially because I have no interest really ever in using it, but it seems to have swept the imagination of obviously 800 million or however many it is people's worlds, and I think it seems fundamentally driven by the need to be connected to other human beings, and I think that's just something that's very human that we all need and want. And I think looking at the way that you could translate that into another stage of actual real valuable, as in not monetary but valuable connection, and in real life connection, and make that the emphasis rather than a kind of it being about charity or doing good. It's about meeting people you actually might want to meet and having interesting conversations.
You've got experience in business for good, as it were, outside of the sort of social media space, haven't you? I mean, this is something that you've worked in within the sort of scope of your fashion world in the past.
Well, I've been modelling, well, I don't really model much anymore, but I started modelling 10 years ago, and I was always interested, I always felt kind of ill at ease a lot of the time about working in that industry and just questioning, did I really believe in the things I was advertising, etc. And worked with several different charities, all great over the years, but increasingly came to the conclusion that I really think that looking at business structures and production lines is fundamental. You know, it's so important to do, because if we don't kind of affect change in that global infrastructure, then kind of band-aid, end-of-the-line solutions are only going to go so far. And so now, for example, with the Body Shop, work on campaigning specifically with the fact that you can change lots of people's lives just through simply purchase power, and then consumers become very active participants in that dialogue.
You say this is about cooperation, not competition, and I quote you on this, abundance, not scarcity. You've spent months, as I say, researching the potential power of the gifting economy. What's the bottom line here, though? Does this site make money going forward?
Interestingly, by lovely kind of chance, again, we had breakfast with Mohammed Yunus this morning, and I was asking him about his business model, because I'm really interested in the idea of trying to, if it's not successful, you know, like obviously there's a kind of play with the word. If it is impossible and humans aren't going to do this, then I think it's irrelevant to kind of discuss that. Anyway, if it is really successful, there's so many examples, and Jimmy could talk probably much more about that than me, of very successful internet companies that haven't had a kind of innate business structure built in from the beginning. And I think actually it would be paradoxical in a way to do from the beginning in a typical way. But ideally, in my kind of idealistic vision, it would make a lot of money and then roll that into kind of impossibly great projects.
And it might be something that people accuse you of, and that being idealistic, if it wasn't that Jimmy Wells is sitting next to you here, who has admitted to the fact that he had no business model when he started up. Just talk to what Lily has just been discussing there, the need or not for an innate sort of business model at this point.
Well, I mean, I can speak to the question, you know, quite generally. If you are trying to build a really big and profitable business, you had better have a business model up front. But if you've just got something awesome and cool that has to be built, then your thinking really has to be about, can I find a way to make it sustainable? Can I make it work? And, you know, a lot of really cool and awesome things never make a whole lot of money. So I just think that for me, just the way I operate, it's never the first question. If the first question is, what can I do to make the most possible money, then you probably won't make any money. I mean, everybody's mind's on Facebook. I can guarantee you Mark Zuckerberg, he didn't start out saying, how can I make the most possible money? If you know him at all, he's super obsessed with the product. He cares about Facebook. And I'm sure he's perfectly happy to have made a small fortune. But I don't think, you know, if you were just driving to suck as much money as possible out, you wouldn't have made a lot of the decisions that he made along the way. He made the decision to make Facebook as useful as possible to as many people as possible.
I wonder, though, as you are suggesting that, whether you don't also think that it sort of helps if you have first mover advantage, which you would have with something like Impossible.com to a certain extent. I know that you, if nothing else, want to just open this space for discussion. But you certainly had first mover advantage with Wikipedia. Mark had first mover advantage with Facebook. Does that help in allowing you to sort of dump a business model for the time being and sort of get on with the kind of vision?
Yeah, it's a piece of it. I think it can be overstated, but certainly we know for a lot of things online, not necessarily business, a lot of things online that are network-oriented, people go where other people are, and it does make sense to just get started and get a group of people going on it because of that first mover advantage.
And also, I think, I'm no expert on this, but just from common sense, it requires, particularly with any of those examples, millions of, or at least hundreds of thousands of users before that even becomes a relevant dialogue. And so, yeah, it doesn't, as you said, making it as good as possible as a product seems to be the kind of primary focus.
How do you deal with anti-social behavior on a site like this? I know that this is something that you've had and will continue to have experience of with Wikipedia. How would you suggest that you would level out the misuse, as it were?
I think it's all still information, so the actual specific details will likely change, but my philosophy kind of with it from the beginning is like it shouldn't play God as a system, and it's about using technology to allow people to see the possibilities and then be responsible humans and see how it plays out, and have kind of feedback systems and moderation systems, and allow users to moderate as well, so that the people using it kind of informing and self-regulating the system, as opposed to it being a kind of top-down heavy way of moderating.
I mean, I think one of the, in many ways, I think I always advise people, if they start with that question, you're asking the wrong question. If you think about designing, whatever you're designing, be it Wikipedia or eBay or anything, and you first start out thinking about what are all the bad things people might do and how do we design it so the bad people can't do bad things, you'll never get anywhere because you'll create a lockdown system that doesn't work for people. Instead, you say, let's be as open as we can for as long as we can. And yeah, a few people will misbehave. You've got to figure out when to block them, how to block them, and those kinds of things. But you don't start with that as a design principle because if you do, you end up, you would have never started eBay. You would have said at eBay, you would have said, we're afraid people might get ripped off, so what we're going to do is we're going to do credit checks on everybody who's selling anything. We're going to require a personal interview of people, something like this kind of crazy thing. Instead, you go, no, let people get on there, and there'll be a few people who rip people off, and we'll block them, and we'll report them to the cops and so forth. But you don't design around the bad people. You design around the good people. And you give, because there's many more of us good people than bad people.
It's like you said us.
Yeah.
You're all included there.
Yeah, they look all right. Yeah.
You must get a lot of ideas being thrown at you, don't you, by people like Lily who have got an idea and hope that they'll, if nothing else, gain some experience by working with you. In the best case scenario, have you back projects. I know that you have got some quite sort of definitive ideas on the future of social media. How does the gifting economy play into your ideas about where we go from here?
Well, I mean, I think it's really important. And it is true, a lot of people do pitch ideas to me. Fortunately, I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, so people don't ask me for money. They look me up in Wikipedia and go, oh, he doesn't really have money. So, I think that the gift economy, this broad concept, is something that's really, we're just beginning to understand it. I mean, if you think about open source software, how many websites, how many businesses are built on this amazing, set of software, from Linux, Apache, Perl, PHP, MySQL, all these things that really came from programmers who wrote it and gave it to the world. It's really incredibly powerful, and we see it, Wikipedia obviously has transformed the world in a major way because people are willing to do things. If they find it fun and worthwhile, they'll give their time. And I think as we've just begun to scratch the surface because with the tools that we have today that allow people to come together in a way that they couldn't have. You really wouldn't be able to find 100 people who want to do something in the past. It would be so expensive. What are you going to do, send letters to everybody? Now you can do all kinds of interesting things, and I think it's a really powerful force going forward.
And I think because I'm not, again, an expert in this, so without going too deep into this territory, I think it's interesting to think about it in the context of the kind of economic situation we're in. And this idea I had a year and a half ago where that was kind of less prevalent in the media and it wasn't related to that necessarily. But I think that there's real utilitarian value that's not to be underestimated for people who actually really need alternative ways to get things done and kind of more vulnerable people in more kind of difficult communities. And you see it happened in Argentina, it's happening in Greece, that there's a trend towards where kind of big banking systems fail, there's a trend towards more localized structures and kind of markets pop up. And that's already been demonstrated, and I think that, I'm not trying to say it's the reason for making this, but I think there's real value to be seen in the internet offering different possibilities. And this might be one of many that come to the surface. And it'd be interesting to see what does. And
with a minute to go, I know that when we spoke earlier on, I thought that was a really important point that you made, and I'll make it again, is that you're not necessarily concerned that this will be the be-all and end-all in this space, but the message to people here today is what?
This is like the beginning of a sketch of an idea that I think has huge potential. I mean, it has enough potential that I'm dedicating all my time and money to. Because I think it has real potential and potentially good value. I don't mean monetary there. And I want to involve as many kind of brilliant people like Jimmy in the dialogue to try and make this example as strong as it can be, and that's kind of an open call to action. But I'm also open to
one piece I'll say, Lily's got a great mind for the marketing, the philosophy of it, the inspiration of the concept, but she's not a programmer. And so technical talent is something that we're looking for. And I think that's, we'd love to hear from people who think it's cool and would like to help out.
And we're already at beta, so we're already testing, so it's in the works.
Yeah.
But,
Get on board. Tick, tick, tick. Sarah, I've never done that before.
Perfect.
20 minutes on the nose. I give you Jimmy Wales and Lily Cole. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.